Depends on how late I'm running before the rehearsal.
Well, yeah, assuming that you translate.
Yeah. This feels like true confessions. Yeah, the camera's on, so. It's tricky to answer because practice is just such a different thing than it was 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you know. So back then I had, I don't know, 30 minutes of stuff I did, starting out with Shradik and going through some dunas and some etudes and scales and arpeggios and double stops and all that kind of good stuff. And that was definitely a part of every single day. Now I have, depending on what's feeling stiff or creaky that day, I have, you know, or if there's something in a piece I'm playing that's bugging me, that I'm struggling with, I might tailor any warm-ups I do to that. I can feel like my extensions are just getting weak or something. I might spend a week warming up on some extension exercises, or if I've got a piece where there are a bunch of double stops, all those old scales and double stops get pulled back out to just kind of reinforce and all that. But it depends.
The evolution of string player over the years is an interesting thing. I mean, and we're all different too, of course. I mean, just you are. But you know, in my most intensive work period, which was pretty much all of grad school, you know, what would, I guess, be considered warm-up was really the heart and core of what I did. I might do 3 hours of those kinds of things. I sort of became like a true believer at the fervor once I finally figured out, after all these other teachers trying to convince me these things were valuable, when I really figured it out, I just kind of went overboard. And so that was, but I really feel like that much work, that consistently over that many years, took me to a place where now, yeah, I understand my technique intimately. I can sort of track, oh, this is kind of drifting, and so it needs a bump. I don't have to do it very often. And, you know, right now it's just sort of in my life, I don't have so much time to practice, so everything's kind of drifting down. And I kind of watch it and go, well, okay. I wonder what'll happen when it gets here. But, so every once in a while, but you know, then I have a performance or something that I have to do a little work for, and it kind of keeps it from. So I mean, I call that survival mode, and I've been in that for a while. I'll tell you something interesting, and I don't know, you may actually want to hear your teacher talk about this, or not. I don't know. Maybe you've had plenty of it, but my grandmother was very interesting about this subject because she strongly believed in this kind of this ideal that in the course of your career there were going to be many occasions when you did not have this luxury. And of course, if you think of the era that she came from, there were also probably far more occasions where you were performing in a place that was not heated, or a place that was not air conditioned, or a place, or where you just didn't have very much control over what was going on, and then you had to play. And so it would be a very regular occurrence that when I was taking lessons with her, or if I played for her when I came home from school or something, I would come in from negative 20 degrees, and she'd be in a hurry to get me playing so that I could have that experience of playing with cold hands, and to know that that was an important ability. And she had 1,000 stories, of course, to back this up as to why it was important. And so that was always kind of lurking underneath some of my thinking, was one ought to be able to do very well without this luxury of let's get everything set up. And so I've always had that as kind of a goal. And at some point, and I always challenged myself in that way. I would often, we did a school performance this morning, some of us, I would often challenge myself over the years to simply, you know, all my colleagues would be warming up and I just would be sitting there and they'd get very annoyed with me. You know, but to have that opportunity to say, let's see what happens if I sit here. And it does pay off because even recently in this Tennessee cello workshop I did about 3 years ago, I was the last one to play the faculty concert. I was playing right after Steve Doan, who's really quite a god of the instrument. And you know, and of course we were all just sitting there watching each other play. So at the end of an hour sitting there, you know, I had to get up on stage and do my thing right away. And so, you know, I guess that's, I think it's valuable to have like the technical warm-up routine over time for practicing. But I also think it's important not to become too dependent or too sort of like this feeling like I need to be warmed up to play well. I think look for ways to experience not that, you know, not having to do that. Although, of course, don't hurt yourself. That's what that's right.
You know, you probably know a lot of what I will say. But for me, for my own practice, you know, I know myself at least well enough to know that what I need to do for left hand sort of comfort and kind of get things moving the way I think I'd like them to. So for me, it has to do with framework and just sort of reminding myself, you know, where things are on the instrument. But more interesting than what I spend a lot more time in my warm-up is just, you know, playing and looking for certain sounds. And what I mean by that is what I find to be the case with a lot of students of all ages is that the warm-up part of the practice is there's not a lot of listening that goes on. It's kind of memory for motion and, you know, how the muscles are going about things, but the ears are by and large turned off. And I know for me, it was a very meaningful experience to kind of the realization of, you know, if I'm actually looking for particular sounds, then, you know, even the warm-up is a lot more meaningful, and I could find that warmed up feeling a heck of a lot faster than just going through the motions and hoping that I got there. But it's a very deliberate sort of, you know, ear training exercise almost. So looking for specific sounds gave me the feeling I was looking for, gave me the connection right to left that I was looking for. So that's what and it doesn't take as long as it used to, certainly.
I have a question kind of off of that topic. What like specific, I guess, strategies do you give to your students to get them to get to that point where they listen more than they worry about like their technique? You know, like they're constantly listening to what they're doing. Because I know that's a struggle for me, and probably for a lot of other people too, is just to always listen to exactly what you're doing. So how do you, I guess, try to get your students to do that? Specifically, like what exercises?
It's going to be different for me, for you know, each individual, of course.
Well, yeah. But
I mean, it's interesting. Some students, when I come across a student who, you know, it doesn't take long sometimes to diagnose, I'll say, you know, the student who is maybe really passionate about what they do, but they're playing and they're hearing while they're playing, they're hearing their favorite recording, you know, something along those lines. They're not hearing really the details of what they're doing because this really strong feeling they have for, you know, what the sound that they have in their ear, which is probably not to a large extent their own. So that's an interesting process to really break things down and have, you know, the individual really be able to pay careful attention to the details. It's often a very sad beginning, you know, to that, because it's a really kind of a blow to one's ego, because I think there's a very natural, strong association for it, but I feel so strongly about the music, and you're telling me that I'm not, you know, getting to those not reaching those goals for whatever reasons. I think for you know, just heightening one's awarenesses, I think this maybe falls under that larger umbrella, but listening, you know, developing listening skills. You know, there are lots of tools we use, recording devices, anymore. Audio recording, even video recording is so easy to do anymore. So that's, you know, to be the objective listener and observer to what one does can go a long way for them. Lots of strategies to pick up.
Well, I mean, well, I don't know if you know how much of what I'm doing is to this. I mean, I'm sure you guessed that a lot of it is, and a lot of it is. The specific strategy I use, which you do know, though, is worth sharing. Is I mean, I believe so strongly in that the ear has to be awake before anything else really happens, and so I talk about the tuning of the instrument is the symbol. How we go about that is the symbol for how the care we're going to take with the rest of our work. And the whole business of listening slowly, waiting until you can hear the actual components of the sound, the overtones, the beats, and understanding sound the way a sculptor understands marble or clay, instead of just kind of taking sound and kind of, it's, you know, sort of our opponent. We have to understand it intimately, and that's where all this comes from, is that's the beginning of knowing how to listen to yourself, is being able to listen at all. And that skill, when you can listen deeply into the sound and you understand, oh, the component to listening is time. It's not like some sort of thing that just happens. You have to actually sit and wait for the sound to kind of get all the way through your brain and register what's going on. And this is why it's so hard to listen to yourself when you play, because when we play, we're so active, we don't actually do that. So for me, the strategy is very much this warm-up routine, but this routine that starts by awakening the ear and then moves through simple but building elements without ever leaving the physical components as well that we're talking here, without leaving the ear behind. And so that by the time you're doing things that require quicker thought and quicker action, hopefully the ear is still engaged. And then, of course, then the other thing is just this enormous emphasis on very slow work. That's the only way, right, the time component, the only way you can listen to yourself and play at the same time is to go very, very slowly. And of course, how slowly and the context, that is what's tailored to the individual and tailored by the individual. But that would be the core of that for me.
I had an off-topic question. If you weren't doing music, what would you be? Okay, or if you can't think of that one.
Oh, no.
I like that question.
I'm curious.
I think I should know back there.
I'll have to think for I don't know. I honestly don't know. Just, you know, I was not in middle school when, for some strange reason, I knew that, you know, viola instruction, higher education, I knew so early on that I don't know why, but I did. So yeah, it's been pretty single-minded.
Chance I might be teaching something else. I don't know what that would be exactly. Violin took over, and music took over that part of my life early enough that there were a lot of things I enjoyed and a lot of things I, you know, found interested in or was good at or whatever, but did not quite get to the point where it really got tested in the way that you kind of need to test out a career path. So, chance I might be teaching something else. I also, in my next life, I want to come back as. I love medical stuff. I might be a doctor. I don't know if I have it in me to be a surgeon, but I'm fascinated by all that stuff. Yeah. The stuff that
No, you know, I think you'd make a great surgeon.
Maybe in the movie or something, you can play it.
I mean, I'd be, you know, exactly how, since I know so much more about these kinds of fields now, I mean, I have a very strong ongoing interest in science in general, and just the kind of ways that technology is moving and shaping the future. I'm sure I'd be in the sciences, and you know, probably where I was headed all through my childhood. In fact, I never intended to be a musician. No one ever thought I was going to be a musician. I displayed no particular interest or aptitude until a certain age, and then suddenly I did. And then everyone said, "Where'd that come from? And, what are we going to do about it?" It was always headed. I was always headed towards being a biologist or a scientist, probably somewhere in that field.
You know, Stephen, I can recall, you know, before music really took over, like my older brother, I swam. I swam competitively for 10 years, and there was a time where I thought, you know, oh, college, a swim scholarship. That's kind of what, you know, my coaches were, you know, that was kind of what was talked about. And then can't do both.